Hey everyone, this is Ken Klippenstein with TYT Investigates. I'm going to be talking to you about Congress's attempt to reauthorize the Patriot Act, or a version of the Patriot Act, and they went about it in a very quiet, sort of sly way by sneaking it into other legislation that wasn't clearly labeled. The reason a lot of folks know about this is because AOC took to Twitter to condemn that. Not only her, but another member of the squad, Ilhan Omar, did as well, and that's really what touched off a lot of the debate about it. What's important to know about the Patriot Act, it's a post 9/11 law that was sort of, hastily passed that granted the government all sorts of, I think, extraordinary authorities to conduct essentially warrantless surveillance of U.S. citizens, supposedly they would say to prevent terror attacks. But it's been how many years since 9/11? They keep reauthorizing it because it wasn't authorized to be open-ended, since it was understood to be a sort of extraordinary circumstances. But what we're seeing in the Congress now with this omnibus law that they're trying to pass, they snuck in language that would reauthorize the Patriot Act. And to just give you a sense of sort of how creepy I think it is, because we all normalized that very quickly, because obviously people were scared after 9/11. We didn't know, is this day one of a longer operation? So I can understand why people were at least scared. But let me just read to you what the Patriot Act, it's an acronym, what it means. I think that'll give people a sense of how creepy it is. So it was originally actually called the USA Patriot Act. And you can't make this up. And so that stands for USA Patriot Act, uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, Act of 2001. Now, what is meant by appropriate tools required to intercept? This refers, of course, to NSA surveillance. This refers to mass collection. This refers to exactly the kind of surveillance that Edward Snowden was trying to draw attention to when he blew the whistle on the programs that he saw. And these are, in essence, programs that don't actually require court approval the whole idea of the Constitution is the government can't look at what you're up to unless there's some sort of reasonable suspicion that what you're up to is, unlawful activity. And what these mass collection programs say is just, oh, forget all that. We're just going to collect everything, and then we'll figure out later what we want to look at. And serious constitutional implications. Thankfully, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, took to Twitter and referred to another tweet referencing this reauthorization that had been snuck into a continuing resolution and not clearly labeled. She says, quote, "Yeah, that's going to be a no from me, dog." I thought that was an appropriately informal and sort of caustic response to a law that we should have dealt with under Obama at the very least, maybe even not had it after 9/11. And it looks like we're still not dealing with it now, and they're still reauthorizing it. And I just want to point out how courageous it is for her to go up against her own party, because many of the Democrats are voting for this legislation. I don't know if they're aware of it or not. They should be. They should be aware of what they're voting for, but it's sort of hidden in the language. So that takes courage to stand up to your own party like that. And then she was joined, of course, by Ilhan Omar, another member of the so-called progressive squad. She said, "Yeah, no, count me out," in reference to the Patriot Act reauthorization. And it's not just them. There's even some Republicans who, one might disagree with on all sorts of economic issues, but they are randomly good on this. For example, Justin Amash, very conservative, said, "Democratic leaders are using a spending bill to sneak through a reauthorization of the Patriot Act." And he goes on to describe, just to give you a sense that he's not being partisan about this. He says that his own party, along with the Democrats, blocked his resolution that he introduced to try to stop the Patriot Act from being reauthorized. So this is coming from both parties. Both parties appear to want the Patriot Act reauthorized and don't seem to have any interest in stopping this really extraordinary program that we have that I don't think, let's assume we needed it after 9/11. I don't believe that's the case, but just for the sake of argument, let's assume 9/11 was a very scary time. Maybe Al-Qaeda had other assets elsewhere that they were going to try to activate. Al-Qaeda is not really operationally active much anymore. ISIS is not as well. This is a much different situation that we're in now than in the weeks following 9/11. So I don't see how you make that argument that we still need that, because the threat doesn't exist anymore, even if you thought it did enough to justify it before. And so Amash goes on to say, quote, "Neither party protects your rights, even though securing rights is why the government exists." And at least in this respect, I might not agree with Amash about a hell of a lot of other things, but Sure does seem like the government doesn't care. It sure does seem like Congress doesn't care a whole lot about standing up to the White House and the executive on these authorities that they've invoked, because every couple of years it gets reauthorized again and again and again. And we're lucky if there's even a debate. There should be a public debate, an assessment. Okay, what are the risks? Does this justify these kind of authorities? Because you have to weigh also the risk of giving the government all these powers to contravene the requirement that they get warrants and permission from a neutral party to surveil people. So I would recommend, as various good rights groups like Fight for the Future took to Twitter and said, quote, House Democrats just caved and included a reauthorization of the Patriot Act mass surveillance program in the continuing resolution budget bill. They said, retweet if you want Congress to repeal the Patriot Act. I think that's the right idea. Contact Congress, contact your congressperson, tell them, because they may not even know. I know a lot of congressional staffers, and many of these politicians don't actually know a lot of what they're voting for. So if you call and register or just send an email, or it doesn't have to be anything fancy, it'll usually just go to voicemail. You have to talk to anybody. Just register your dissatisfaction with this part of the legislation, and they'll at least